A frozen corpse. Still standing. Still walking. November 1812, somewhere in frozen Russia. A French soldier drops dead mid-step, but doesn't fall. The cold freezes him so fast his muscles lock up. He stays upright, musket on shoulder, walking like a ghost. A witness sees this. His name is Philippe de Ségur. He'll be one of only 20,000 men out of 600,000 to make it home alive. In this video, the decisions that kept men alive when 580,000 died. What they ate when there was no food. How some survived cold that killed others. And why those who made it home never stopped having nightmares. Let's start with the moment Philippe realizes they're all going to die. October 19th, 1812. Moscow. Napoleon gives the order. Retreat. Philippe de Ségur is a colonel. He's seen battles, but he's never seen this kind of fear. Officers whisper in corners. Maps show 600 miles of burned countryside between them and safety. He writes in his diary, "We all know what's ahead. We don't say it out loud, but everyone knows." What he doesn't know yet? His army will start eating itself within 2 weeks. Here's why. The army left Moscow with 10 days of food. That's it. They're supposed to find more at supply depots along the way. But Russian partisans destroyed those depots weeks ago. By early November, soldiers are killing horses for meat. Not cavalry horses, those are still needed. Pack horses, artillery horses, any horse that can't fight. They butcher them at night, cook the meat over fires made, from furniture looted from abandoned houses. Within days, there are no horses left to butcher. So they start eating the dead ones. Horses that died from exhaustion or cold. The meat is frozen, sometimes rotten. Men get sick. They eat it anyway. Philippe watches a group of soldiers fighting over a dead horse 3 days old. The meat is green. They're tearing at it with their hands. He thinks, we've become animals. But here's where it gets worse. By mid-November, there are no dead horses either. They've all been eaten. So soldiers start looking at each other differently. Philippe never writes about cannibalism directly, but other survivors do. French surgeon Heinrich von Rose describes finding human bones with knife marks, bodies with flesh carved off, campfires with suspicious meat. Nobody talks about it. Everyone knows. The temperature is dropping. It's November in Russia. Some nights hit -20 Celsius. The French army left France with summer uniforms. Light wool, cotton, nothing designed for Russian winter. Men start wrapping themselves in anything they can find. Curtains, carpets, women's dresses looted from Moscow. They tie rags around their feet because their boots fell apart weeks ago. Philippe sees a general wrapped in a pink ball gown over his uniform. The general doesn't care. Dignity is a luxury for people who aren't freezing to death. At night, soldiers huddle around fires. In the morning, some of them don't wake up. They froze while sleeping. Their friends check the bodies for anything useful, coats, boots, food, then leave them. There's no time to bury the dead. The column has to keep moving. Here's what Philippe realizes around November 15th. Cold kills faster than you think. A man gets separated from the column. Maybe he wanders off looking for food. Maybe he just can't keep up. It doesn't matter. Within an hour, his fingers stop working. Within 2 hours, he can't think clearly. Within 3, he lies down to rest and never gets up. Cold doesn't hurt after a while. It just makes you tired. So tired. Sleep seems like a good idea. That's how most of them died. Not dramatically. Just stopping. Quick side note. The fastest killer wasn't even the cold. It was typhus. The army was crawling with lice. Lice carried typhus. Men got fever, delirium, death within days. No treatment, no cure. You either survived or you didn't. The combination of typhus, starvation, and cold meant soldiers were dying at a rate of about 6,000 per day by late November. Back to Philippe. The Russian army isn't even attacking most of the time. They don't need to. Cossacks pick off stragglers. That's it. The French army is destroying itself. Philippe starts noticing something strange around November 20th. The men who survive aren't necessarily the strongest. Plenty of young, healthy soldiers die in the first weeks. Meanwhile, some older veterans keep going. What's the difference? The survivors are ruthless. They steal food from the weak. They push slower men out of the way at river crossings. They take coats off dying soldiers before the soldiers are fully dead. They don't help anyone who falls. They don't look back. Philippe interviews survivors after the war. One pattern emerges. Compassion was fatal. Every man who stopped to help a friend, who shared his last food, who waited for stragglers, died. The men who made it home were the ones who became selfish monsters. Philippe himself survives by following one rule: never stop moving. Men around him say just 5 minutes rest. He keeps walking. They die. He lives. But here's the thing that haunts him. He's not proud of surviving, because survival meant watching friends die and doing nothing. It meant stepping over bodies. It meant choosing yourself over everyone else, every single time. November 26th, the Berezina River. This is where it gets truly nightmarish. The river is partially frozen, not frozen enough to walk across, too frozen for boats. The bridges are destroyed, and 3 Russian armies are closing in from different directions. The French are trapped. Engineers volunteer to build temporary bridges. They wade into the river, water temperature just above freezing, and start hammering wooden supports into the riverbed. Philippe watches from the bank. Men are standing waist deep in that water. Their hands turn blue, then white. Some of them pass out from cold and drown while working. Their bodies float downstream. It takes 2 days to build 2 rickety bridges. When the crossing starts, it's chaos. 40,000 people trying to cross 2 narrow bridges at once. Soldiers, civilians, wagons, artillery, everyone shoving, screaming, desperate. The bridges start breaking under the weight. Engineers keep repairing them while people are still crossing. Some repairs involve pulling bodies out of the support structure because dead men got crushed between the timbers. Russian artillery starts firing. Shells land in the crowd. People panic. The shoving gets worse. Philippe sees a woman holding a baby. She's at the edge of the bridge. Someone pushes her. She falls into the river. Gone. The baby too. Nobody stops. The crowd keeps moving. Thousands fall into the water. They drown within minutes. The cold stops your muscles from working. You sink. By the time Philippe crosses, the river is full of corpses. Frozen, floating, piled against the ice. He makes it to the other side, looks back, sees the bridges collapse completely. 10,000 people, still on the wrong side. The Russian army closes in. Those people are dead or captured. Philippe keeps walking. If you're still watching at this point, genuinely, thank you. Hit the like button if this is landing for you. Makes a real difference. Continuing. December 5th. Napoleon abandons the army. He gets in a sleigh with a few officers and races ahead toward Paris. His official reason? He needs to get back to France to raise a new army and prevent political crisis. The real reason? He's saving himself. Philippe is there when Napoleon leaves. The emperor doesn't announce it. He just disappears one night. In the morning, soldiers realize Napoleon is gone. Morale, which was already non-existent, somehow gets worse. Marshal Murat takes command. He has no idea what he's doing. The retreat becomes even more disorganized. Units fragment. Officers stop giving orders. It's every man for himself. Philippe is now with a group of maybe 200 men. A month ago, his regiment was 2,000. He doesn't know what happened to the rest. Dead, captured, lost, doesn't matter. They reach Smolensk on December 9th. Smolensk was supposed to have supply depots, food, shelter, rest. The depots are empty. The Russians got there first and destroyed everything. Men start deserting, just wandering off into the snow. Some are looking for food. Some have given up and want to die somewhere quiet. Some have gone insane from starvation and don't know what they're doing anymore. Philippe stops trying to keep count of who's left. December 14th, they cross back over the Niemen River, back into Poland, out of Russia. Of the 600,000 men who crossed that river in June, maybe 20,000 combat-effective soldiers make it back. The rest are dead, captured, or so broken they'll never fight again. Philippe de Ségur survives. He's 31 years old. He'll live another 61 years. But here's what he writes decades later. I escaped Russia with my life. I never escaped Russia in my mind. He has nightmares for the rest of his life. Always the same. He's back in the snow, freezing, watching his friends die, knowing he's next. He wakes up screaming. His wife gets used to it. His children grow up hearing their father scream in his sleep. Every veteran Philippe talks to after the war, same story. The nightmares never stop. The cold never leaves. 50 years later, old men who survived Russia can't stand winter. Even mild cold triggers panic. One survivor, a captain named François Piles, refuses to leave his house between November and March every year for the rest of his life. December kills him psychologically even when he's safe and warm in France. Another veteran, Jean-Baptiste Barré, writes in 1840, I am 60 years old. Russia was 28 years ago. I still wake up cold. The trauma was permanent. But here's what's strange. Most survivors don't blame Napoleon. They blame Russia, the country, the cold, the distances, not the man who led them there. Philippe writes, the emperor did what emperors do. Russia did what Russia does. We were caught between. It's almost like they need Napoleon to not be at fault. Because if Napoleon made a mistake, then they suffered for nothing. But if Russia was simply too big, too cold, too brutal to conquer, then at least their suffering meant something. They tried to do the impossible. They failed. That's tragic, but not meaningless. Blaming Napoleon would mean admitting they were fools who followed a fool to their deaths, so they don't. Subscribe if you're not already. There's a video like this every week, and we're just getting to the most intense part. Let's see what Philippe realizes years later. Philippe spends the rest of his life trying to make sense of what happened. He writes a massive history of the campaign, published in 1824. It becomes one of the most important sources we have about the retreat. Reading it is unsettling. He's trying to be objective, analytical, recording facts. But every few pages, the mask slips. He'll be describing troop movements. And suddenly, I saw a mother abandon her child in the snow. The child was crying. She kept walking. I understood why. I did nothing. That's the real story, not the military history, the moral collapse. Philippe talks to other survivors while writing his book. He asks them, what's the worst thing you did to survive? Most won't answer. Some do. One man admits he killed a Russian civilian for a loaf of bread, stabbed him, took the bread, ate it while the man bled out. Another admits he stole boots off a soldier who wasn't quite dead yet. The soldier begged him not to. He took them anyway. A third admits he left his best friend behind when the friend broke his leg. Just walked away. Listened to the friend calling his name, getting quieter, until silence. These aren't evil men. Before Russia, they were normal, decent, human. Russia changed them. Philippe writes, war reveals who you are. Russia revealed that we are all capable of becoming monsters to survive. Here's what he never fully processes. He's one of the lucky ones. 20,000 men made it back, most of them physically intact. But the psychological casualties were much higher. Philippe counts at least 15 veterans he knows personally who kill themselves in the years after the war. They survive Russia, they get home, and then, when they're finally safe, they put a gun in their mouth. One veteran's suicide note, preserved in French archives. I can't stop seeing them every night, the frozen faces. I need it to stop. Philippe understands. He has the same nightmares, but he doesn't kill himself. He writes instead, tries to turn the horror into history, make it mean something. Does it work? Not really. The nightmares continue until he dies in 1873, age 91, 61 years after Russia, and according to his grandson, he was still having the nightmares at the end. Some things don't heal, but here's what Philippe does accomplish. He tells the truth. His history doesn't glorify Napoleon, doesn't make excuses, doesn't pretend the soldiers were heroes. He describes what it actually was: horror, survival, moral collapse, the death of 580,000 men for nothing. Other historians write about strategy. Philippe writes about frozen corpses that kept walking. And that's why we remember him, because he refused to let anyone forget what it cost. Let me tell you what happened to some of the others. Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave, commanded the rear guard during the retreat. He was the last French officer to cross back into Poland. Legend says he walked into a tavern, threw his musket on the table, and said, "Here is the rear guard of the Grande Armée." Ney survived Russia, then got executed by firing squad in 1815 after Napoleon's final defeat. He refused a blindfold. His last words: "Soldiers, aim for the heart." Marshal Murat, who took command when Napoleon fled, made it home. Tried to keep his throne in Naples. Failed. Got executed by firing squad in 1815. Wore his, finest uniform for the execution. Gave the order to fire himself. General Caulaincourt, who rode back to France with Napoleon, became Napoleon's diplomat. After Napoleon fell, Caulaincourt wrote his own memoir, blames everything on Russia's winter and scorched earth. Never blames Napoleon. Dies quietly in 1827. Surgeon Heinrich von Roos, who wrote about the cannibalism, goes back to Germany, becomes a doctor, refuses to talk about Russia for the rest of his life. When people ask, he says, "I survived by not being worth eating." And Napoleon? He gets back to Paris, raises a new army, keeps fighting until 1814, abdicates, comes back in 1815 for the 100 Days, loses at Waterloo, gets exiled to St. Helena, dies in 1821. On St. Helena, he talks about Russia constantly, obsessively, trying to figure out where it went wrong. He blames the cold. He blames Russian tactics. He blames his marshals. He blames supply failures. He never blames himself. In his final years, he rewrites the Russian campaign in his mind, turns it into a noble tragedy. Bad luck. Circumstances beyond control. Almost a victory. It's complete delusion. But it's the delusion he needs to live with himself. Meanwhile, the survivors are having nightmares. Here's the final piece that Philippe discovers years later. Russia changed how war worked. Before 1812, European armies fought battles. Winner takes the field. Loser retreats. Honorable. Civilized. Russia proved you could win without fighting. Retreat. Burn everything. Let winter and distance do the killing. No honor, no civilization, just survival. It was brutal, it was effective, and it became the model. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Soviets used the same strategy. Scorched earth, trade space for time, let the invader overextend, then crush them in winter. It worked again. Different technology, same principles, same result. So in a weird way, the 600,000 men who died in 1812 taught the world a lesson. Some countries are too big, too brutal, too willing to sacrifice everything to be conquered. You can invade Russia, you can reach Moscow, you can win battles, but you can't beat the winter. You can't beat the distances, and you can't beat a population willing to burn their own country rather than surrender. Philippe understands this by the 1850s. He's old. The world has moved on. Napoleon is a legend now, not a living memory. But Philippe remembers the truth. He remembers the frozen soldier who kept walking, the mother who abandoned her child, the bridges collapsing into the river, the screaming at night, the meat that might have been human. He remembers that glory is a lie. Survival is the only victory that matters, and sometimes survival costs everything. Remember that frozen soldier from the beginning? Philippe writes about him in detail. The man was walking in formation. Mid-step, he just stopped living. Heart gave out. Or brain, doesn't matter. Dead instantly. But the cold was so extreme, so sudden, that his muscles froze in position before his body could fall. So he stood there, upright, musket on shoulder, still in formation. His unit kept marching. They marched past him, a dead man standing at attention. Philippe walked past him too. Didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Stopping meant dying. He looked back once. The frozen soldier was still there, standing, waiting, forever. That image is the whole campaign. Men so broken, so destroyed, they can't even fall properly. Just frozen monuments, to their own death, scattered across 1,000 miles of snow. Philippe writes, I saw hundreds of men die. I remember one, the one who wouldn't fall, because he represents what we all became. Dead inside, but still walking, still following orders, still pretending we were soldiers when we'd become corpses weeks earlier. That's what survival looked like. Not heroism, not endurance, just becoming a walking corpse and refusing to admit it until you made it home. Philippe made it home, but in nightmares. He's still there, still walking, still frozen. Some of us never leave the places that break us. If you made it to the end, thank you. This one took weeks of research, reading survivor accounts, trying to understand what it actually felt like. Your time matters. Drop a comment. Did you know about the survivor testimonies before this? What other military disasters should I cover from the ground level? There's always another story that needs telling. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into history's darkest moments. New video every week. See you next video.